I'm going to show you how to hand off your tasks so flawlessly that managing a team actually feels like you're on vacation. I'll do this by sharing the delegation principles that help build a self-running business. Sound effect. 2 short ding sounds. Pause. 1 second.
In the next 15 minutes, you're going to learn how to clone yourself through outsourcing and virtual assistants, shifting from being overwhelmed to buying back your future.
And we're jumping right into a really fascinating source document today.
Yeah, it's called 10 Delegation Secrets to Clone Yourself.
Right. And our mission on this deep dive is to, truly unpack the mechanics of true leverage for you.
Because if you're listening to this, you're probably someone who is constantly absorbing information.
Oh, absolutely. The classic learner profile. Always trying to optimize your workflow, pushing for better results.
But despite, implementing all those various productivity hacks, you might still find yourself staring at your screen late into the evening.
Just wondering how your to-do list actually managed to grow instead of shrink today.
Yeah, it's a frustrating place to be.
It really is. So we're going to figure out how to transition you from being the primary bottleneck in your own daily operations
to acting as the architect of a highly efficient system.
Because the central premise of this source material, it requires a pretty fundamental shift in how we perceive the act of handing off work.
It does. I mean, most professionals treat delegation as a reactive measure.
Like a panic button.
Exactly. A task becomes too heavy or the deadline is just too tight, and so they toss it over the fence to a colleague or a virtual assistant.
Treating it like a temporary escape hatch from the pressure.
Right. But outsourcing, when done correctly, is not an escape hatch. It is an architectural exercise.
You are building an infrastructure that can operate independently of your direct physical involvement.
And the difference between those two approaches, it's the difference between a constant cycle of catching up and achieving actual sustainable freedom in your schedule.
Which reframes the entire effort from a daily chore to a long-term investment.
Precisely. And the source provides a really clear roadmap for constructing that architecture.
Starting with Principle 1, loom over zoom.
Oh man, this targets one of the most insidious time wastes in the modern work environment.
Secretist training constraints.
Yes. We all know the pain of the hour-long live screen share.
Sitting there, clicking through menus while someone watches.
But the real danger isn't even that initial hour you spent walking a new hire through a software platform or a reporting process.
It's the decay of information.
Exactly. A week later, they forget step 4, and your supposed training has just evaporated into thin air.
So you are forced to jump on another call to clarify.
Or they try to guess and make a critical error.
Which means your time investment yielded a negative return.
Yeah, you spent an hour training, and now you're spending another hour fixing the mistakes.
Or retraining them entirely.
And heaven forbid, that team member leaves the company 6 months later.
Then you are back to absolute zero.
It's a massive vulnerability. It relies entirely on human memory and constant synchronous availability.
The source identifies this as a critical failure point.
And offers a solution that fundamentally alters your operational capacity. You need to cement this concept into your daily workflow. Record once. Create an immortal asset.
Record once. Create an immortal asset. I love that phrasing.
It's powerful. The focus moves from instructing a person to creating an artifact.
So if we look at the anatomy of executing this properly, how do we ensure that artifact is actually effective?
Right, because simply recording a screen of someone clicking around silently isn't going to build a capable team.
No, it just creates confusion.
The anatomy of a perfect immortal asset requires you to narrate your thought process, not just your physical actions.
So you're speaking out loud while you work?
Yes. When you use a screen recording tool to capture a task, you must articulate the why behind the what.
Give me an example of what that sounds like.
You explain, I am selecting this specific drop-down menu because the client requested a quarterly view, not an annual view.
You are externalizing your tacit knowledge.
Exactly. You are capturing your decision-making framework and freezing it in time.
Capturing the decision-making framework seems far more valuable than just capturing the clicks.
Oh, without a doubt.
But let's look at the edge cases here, because systems are rarely static.
True.
What happens when the software platform updates its interface?
Or when a specific internal process changes slightly.
Right. Does the immortal asset immediately become obsolete?
That is a common concern, but resilient systems account for iteration.
So you don't throw the whole video away?
If a minor software update changes the location of a button, You do not need to re-record a 20-minute training video.
You utilize the principles of modularity.
Exactly. You record a 60-second patch video that says, update for step 3, the export button has moved to the top right corner.
And you just attach it to the original asset.
More importantly, as you develop your team, updating those assets becomes a delegated task in itself.
Oh, that's brilliant. Your virtual assistant notices the software update, and they record the patch.
The Immortal asset evolves without your direct intervention.
That pushes the concept of an immortal asset into the territory of what the source calls asynchronous freedom.
Yes. We are removing the requirement for two people to exist in the exact same headspace at the exact same moment.
Asynchronous freedom is the ultimate goal of Principle 1.
It means your Tuesday morning is no longer fractured into 15-minute blocks of answering quick questions.
Or walking someone through a spreadsheet for the third time.
Right. When a team member encounters friction, their first instinct is no longer to interrupt your deep work.
Their first instinct is to consult the library of immortal assets you have built.
You are decoupling your business's ability to learn from your personal availability to teach.
Okay, that was the first point on immortal assets, which leads us to Principle 2.
This is where we confront the reality that an immortal asset is only useful if the expected outcome is crystal clear.
And the source introduces a vital framework for this called the definition of done.
To understand the necessity of this, consider a universally understood scenario: ordering a pizza.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you have had an exhausting day, you are starving, and you turn to someone and simply say, "Bring me food."
That is the entirety of your instruction.
Yes. In your mind, you are vividly imagining a perfectly blistered, wood-fired pizza,
You anticipate the crispy charred crust
the rich San Marzano tomato sauce.
and pools of melted buffalo mozzarella bubbling hot from the oven.
It is a highly specific, multisensory expectation.
But you communicated none of those sensory details.
None. You only provided a vague mandate.
Bring me food.
And an hour later, you are handed a lukewarm microwaved flour tortilla.
With a slice of processed, plastic-wrapped American cheese melted in the center.
Technically, the mandate was fulfilled.
It is food.
But the sensory disappointment is immense. You smell damp tortilla instead of wood-fired dough.
You experience a gummy texture when you desired crunch.
And the initial instinct is frustration with the person who brought it.
Of course.
But the failure rests entirely on the one who gave the instruction.
You did not specify the crust, the cheese, or the toppings.
You expected telepathy in place of communication.
That translates perfectly to the business friction we see every day.
It really does.
That is exactly what happens when I ask a virtual assistant for a quick competitor analysis, and I receive a messy, unformatted block of text in a casual email.
Your internal reaction is frustration?
Because I was expecting a cleanly formatted spreadsheet with specific metrics compared side by side.
But looking at it through the lens of the pizza metaphor, you only asked for food.
I didn't outline the columns, the specific data points, or the formatting requirements.
That is the core of the issue. The definition of done requires you to explicitly map out what absolute success looks like before the task even begins.
What are the exact margins?
What is the file naming convention?
What specific databases need to be queried?
This eliminates the guessing game for your team.
It provides them with psychological safety because they know exactly how to succeed.
And it guarantees you receive the wood-fired pizza you actually wanted.
The pushback here is inevitable, though. Mapping out every single parameter, outlining the crust, the cheese, and the toppings down to the last detail, requires a significant upfront cognitive load.
It is incredibly tempting to bypass that step. I know you think it's faster if I just do it myself.
It's the most common trap.
Yes, today it is faster, but doing it yourself costs you 100 hours next year. Train them once to buy back your future.
We really need to analyze that math because the compounding interest of time is a concept we consistently underestimate.
We do. When we look at a task that takes 15 minutes, our brains categorize it as trivial.
But the triviality is a trap.
Exactly. If you perform a 15-minute task every single workday, that equates to roughly 65 hours over the course of a year.
Which is already a massive chunk of time.
But that number doesn't even account for the context-switching tax.
The mental cost of shifting gears.
Right. Every time you pull your brain out of high-level strategic thinking to execute a 15-minute manual data entry task, it takes an average of 20 minutes just to regain your previous state of deep focus.
Wow. So when you factor in the cognitive friction and the lost momentum, that trivial daily task, easily consumes over 100 hours of your productive capacity annually.
It is a clear case of time arbitrage.
You are trading perhaps 1 hour today.
The time it takes to record the immortal asset and rigorously define the parameters of done.
To permanently reclaim 100 hours next year.
You are buying back future capacity at an astonishing discount.
Yet the ego often resists this.
We enjoy the immediate gratification of crossing a quick item off the list.
It makes us feel productive even when we are actually bottlenecking our own scale.
The desire to be the hero who personally executes every detail is the exact mindset that guarantees burnout.
You cannot scale a system if you insist on being the central gear that turns every other mechanism.
Establishing a rigorous definition of done feels painstakingly slow in the present moment.
It feels like you are delaying the actual work.
But that slow, deliberate architecture is the absolute prerequisite for long-term speed.
Once those parameters are locked in, your team can execute complex sequences flawlessly without requiring your oversight.
Exactly.
Let's quickly recap the keys we just covered. Immortal assets and the pizza definition of done. Now, moving past Principle 3 straight to the culmination.
This final transition moves us away from the mechanical tactics of screen recordings and task definitions.
And forces us to examine the underlying philosophy of leadership.
You can utilize all the software in the world and write impeccable definitions of done, but if your core intention is flawed, the system will eventually collapse.
Which brings us to the final principle from the source material. Elevate, don't abdicate.
This represents the philosophical payoff of the entire deep dive.
There is a prevalent, often unspoken assumption that outsourcing is simply a mechanism for discarding unwanted labor.
It is the trap of treating delegation as a garbage disposal.
The source refers to this as handing off trash.
You identify the repetitive, mundane, or frustrating tasks on your desk, and you simply shove them across the digital divide to a virtual assistant.
That is abdication.
You are essentially saying, I am tired of this burden, you carry it.
But in doing so, you withhold the broader context.
You do not explain how this specific task impacts the company's bottom line.
You do not grant them the authority to question or improve the process.
You treat them merely as an extension of your own keyboard.
And the behavioral outcome of abdication is entirely predictable.
When a team member feels they are only there to absorb your discarded tasks, they disengage.
They execute the bare minimum required to avoid reprimand.
They will watch your immortal asset, click the exact 10 buttons you clicked, and never pause to consider if there is a more efficient path.
They become biological robots.
Elevating a team member requires a completely different posture.
You are not dumping a chore.
You are transferring ownership of an outcome.
When you elevate someone, you provide them with the immortal asset so they understand the current baseline.
You provide the definition of done so they know the exact coordinates of success.
But then you deliberately step back and grant them autonomy.
You tell them the outcome is now your responsibility.
If you discover a method to achieve this exact definition of done faster than I did in the training video, implement it.
If you see a redundancy in the workflow, eliminate it.
Consider the practical implications of that shift.
Okay. Imagine you hand off a weekly reporting process.
Abdicating means the assistant manually copies and pastes data for 2 hours every Friday, exactly as you showed them.
Elevating means that a month later, that same assistant comes to you and explains they researched an automation tool.
They connected the 2 software platforms via an API.
And the report now generates itself automatically every Thursday night.
They achieved the definition of done without you even knowing the specific technical steps they took to improve it.
That scenario only materializes if the team member feels a genuine sense of ownership.
Which requires a significant degree of vulnerability from the manager.
You have to actively suppress the urge to micromanage the journey, provided the destination remains intact.
You must trust that the architecture you designed, the clear parameters, and the baseline training is robust enough to support their independent critical thinking.
This leads to the most crucial realization of the entire framework. True productivity is building leaders, not followers.
That is a profound shift in perspective.
It changes the goal line entirely.
The ultimate metric of productivity is no longer an empty inbox at the end of the day.
The metric becomes the creation of a team capable of autonomous problem solving.
A team that drives the mission forward while you are focused on higher leverage strategy.
Or, as the initial promise stated, while you are actually on vacation.
If your system is designed to only produce followers, you guarantee your permanent status as a bottleneck.
Every minor exception to a rule, every slight deviation in a project, will bounce back to your desk for a final ruling.
You might have outsourced the physical clicking of buttons, but you will have retained 100% of the cognitive load.
Elevating your team to act as leaders means you are finally outsourcing that cognitive burden.
You are distributing the intellectual weight of the operation.
That is the definition of true leverage.
So let's tie all these principles together.
We began with the ambition of transforming a chaotic, overwhelming workload into a self-running operation.
Through dissecting these source materials, we have uncovered that this transformation doesn't hinge on finding a magical new app or simply hiring more people.
It demands a ground-up reconstruction of how you view your role.
You are transitioning from the technician who manually turns the gears to the architect who designs the machine.
You abandon the fragility of live, synchronous training and begin compounding your knowledge through a library of immortal assets.
You eliminate the friction of vague expectations by rigidly defining exactly what the pizza must look like before the order is placed.
And most critically, you stop hoarding control and begin empowering your virtual assistants to take genuine ownership of their outcomes.
You are systematically dismantling the daily friction to secure an exponential return on your energy in the future.
You are building an infrastructure that scales without requiring a proportional increase in your own sweat equity.
But delegating tasks is only the first step.
It creates a vacuum, and it is a phenomenal vacuum to have.
You have cleared the low-leverage execution from your daily schedule. You are no longer drowning in the operational weeds.
So the strategic question becomes, what is the highest and best use of that newly created space?
Now that you've bought back your time by building leaders instead of followers, how will you use this newfound leverage to negotiate better deadlines with your own clients or boss?
The leverage you have built internally must now be applied externally to dictate the terms of your broader career or business trajectory.
As you move forward today, apply the definition of done to the very next item on your agenda.
Before you automatically dive into executing it yourself, pause and ask if you can record your screen and create an immortal asset right now.
Stop operating as the bottleneck and start operating as the architect. We will see you in the next deep dive. Keep building those systems.
You've made it this far, so why stop now? There are 2 videos on your screen right now that are perfect for you. Just pick the one that looks most interesting and let's dive back in.